Hey everybody, how's it going? Hope you're having a lovely day. So a few weeks ago I did this video, Samsung display fires kill shot on the entire repair industry with a patent on pixel patterns. And the TLDR of this 30-minute long video is that Samsung is seeking something called a general exclusionary order. What this does is it will exclude any company or individual from importing an AMOLED screen or an OLED screen into the United States unless it has Samsung say so. What Samsung is saying is that it is so difficult to tell the infringing products from the non-infringing products that the best thing that you could do just to be safe is to deny anybody the access to import any sort of AMOLED screen at all, which would lead to Samsung pretty much owning the entire market based on a patent on the pattern and shape of the pixels on the screen. That's what their patent is based on. So this would mean that mobile centrics, injured gadgets, phone LCD parts, and everybody else would not be able to sell these parts. Now, something that comes up very often on this channel is, Lewis, why do you want the manufacturers to sell you parts with right to repair? Why don't you make your own parts? You should make your own parts. Why are you trying to get the government involved? And one of the interesting things here is that when people actually said, okay, cool, you know what, fine. If you don't want to sell us screens, we'll make our own. Samsung got the government involved. And if you're mad at the fact that I spent 30 minutes reading through a 160-page document in this, oh, imagine if you saw the entire 12,000-page patent complaint. That's something that must have cost them at very least several $1 million to put together. But this is what they're seeking. Not a partial exclusionary order, a general exclusionary order, which means nobody would be able to import parts to fix these screens anymore. You would only be able to get them from the manufacturer if they are willing to sell them to you. And the obvious problem here is that the way that Samsung does this in general is just not in a way that's exactly economically viable. One of the things I've talked about recently is the fact that they wanted something along the lines of $206 for a battery for a smartphone because they were gluing the battery to the screen. You have many smartphones that are worth $150 in the used market that Samsung is going to be charging over $200 to get a screen to. Now, this is obviously against the interest of the general public and the customer. The customer should have the ability to choose whether or not they are going to buy the original screen from the vendor or an aftermarket screen that costs $30. If you're willing to give up 5 or 10% in terms of quality, but you are going to be getting a 200 or 300% savings in price, that's a decision that's up to the consumer and that the consumer often makes in the direction of saving money when we're talking about a device that's 5 years old and worth less than a quarter of what it was when you purchased it. So what I wanted to do in this video is really dig into the why as to why this is happening, because it's not happening for the reason that I originally thought. I originally thought, since they were going after a lot of these smaller vendors like mobile centrics and injured gadgets and phone LCD parts and wholesale gadget parts and everybody else, that this was about destroying the independent repair industry. This is far more insidious, and we are unfortunately only pawns in Samsung's game. So if you take a look at a bunch of news articles, it starts to put together a story. Last year, we can see that BOE got an iPhone 14 OLED screen order. Prior to this, Samsung was making all of the OLED displays for Apple. Now, BOE is. And over here, it says that it is confirmed that Apple is picking BOE for the initial order of iPhone 15 displays and that they could potentially overtake Samsung as a leading supplier. BOE regains Apple's trust, could supply more iPhone 15 screens than Samsung. Now, the iPhone is obviously one of the best-selling phones around the world, so if they are going to use somebody else's screens rather than Samsung's, this is going to be a serious cut to their revenues. And this is something that has been kind of simmering over the past year. And as many of you know, Apple and Samsung have been suing each other back and forth over the past 15 years. I mean, Apple says that Samsung stole the iPhone. Samsung says that Apple stole their screen. BlackBerry says that they stole her attention. BlackBerry, can you stop with the weird meows, girl? Get down here. BlackBerry. In these news articles that I've compiled down below, it says, sources say that Samsung is taking action against the U.S. repair shops in an apparent move to deter the Chinese panel makers. If Samsung directly filed a complaint against the Chinese companies, it could grow into a patent war with China, which involves complicated geopolitical issues, an industry source close to the matter told the Korea Herald in condition of anonymity. Yo, BlackBerry. If Samsung directly filed a complaint against the Chinese companies, it could grow into a patent war with China, which involves complicated geopolitical issues, an industry source close to the matter told the Korea Herald. The company is sending an indirect warning to them by raising the issue with the importers. This is also a potential warning to Apple should they decide to use OLED displays from BOE in greater numbers, as the Ming-Chi Kuo rumor predicted. This could be another major patent infringement case between Samsung and Apple, since Apple's classic case against Samsung for copying the iPhone. Samsung will use their patents to ensure that BOE display never gets 70% of Apple's OLED panel business. This is certainly a development to keep an eye on going forward. So Again, Samsung is not able to go to China and say BOE is stealing our stuff. We don't like BOE. That's not going to look good for them in China. So that's kind of a bear that they don't want to poke. But screwing over the entire independent repair industry in the United States to make a point, that's a lot easier to do. Again, you're not saying to BOE directly that we want to damage your business. We are just going to use these repair shops as a Trojan horse to try and make it illegal for you to get your screens into the United States. So Apple, you know, you don't have to use our panels. You don't have to use Samsung OLEDs. You're more than welcome to use that garbage that you put into the iPhone 3. I mean, in all seriousness, if you look it up, I mean, if you guys remember like something like the Samsung 959, this was the Samsung Galaxy S 4G. This phone had an amazing screen compared to everything else at the time. I remember buying this thing in 2010. The screen on it looked immaculate. The HTC Incredible, the HTC Sensation, those screens look like garbage. The iPhone screen from that year looked like shit. Everything that every other manufacturer produced look like crap. And Samsung's screen look amazing. So if Samsung manages to make it so that they're the only ones that can import AMOLEDs into the country, this really does kind of twist Apple's arm into either A, using Samsung panels, or B, having a phone that looks like shit until they come up with their own pattern for pixel formation to come up with a better screen, which I honestly hope Apple does this point because Samsung are acting like dicks. Continuing. Samsung Display has said that it will utilize its patents in various ways amid intensifying competition in the mobile OLED space. During Samsung Electronics' conference call for the fourth quarter, Samsung Display Executive Vice President Choi Kwan-young said that the company will utilize its patents in various ways in response to a question posed by an analyst on how the display maker plans to react to the expanded competition in the small to mid-sized OLED market. So Samsung was asked, how are you going to deal with the fact that you now have competitors? And they responded by saying they are going to use their patents in various ways, which means that this is something that they've been considering for quite a bit of time. Patent lawsuits are usually filed against each other, with compensation conventionally being proportionate to revenue figures, they said. This means that Samsung will likely have to pay more if both parties are shown to have infringed on each other's patents, they added, which is another reason that you don't see Samsung suing BOE or Samsung going after the actual company, but rather going after the independent repair shops and the people who supply them. If Samsung sues another company and then it's found that, well, you know, you used a little of our patent and we used a little bit of yours and vice versa, that's not really very lucrative, and it winds up being this stalemate because, again, Samsung would be going up against somebody their own size. If Samsung goes up against the independent repair industry and steamrolls over the independent repair industry in order to get a general exclusionary order where you're not allowed to import a screen into the United States anymore if it's an AMOLED unless it's Samsung's, that manages to stick a thorn in BOE's side without ever actually showing up in court against a company that is their own size. And that appears to be what's happening. And you can see that, be honest, again, I like Sod Mobile Centrics. I like Shay at Injured Gadgets. I like a lot of these people, but like they're probably going to get steamrolled. Let's be real. So Injured Gadgets over here says, help us fight, keep aftermarket OLEDs in the United States. They have raised $8,200 of their $1 million goal. I used to run a supply company. From 2010 through 2014, I ran a mobile parts supply company. I'm very well aware of the very, very, very limited margins involved in buying screens and then selling them at the markup that independent repair centers are willing to pay for those particular parts. Yeah, if you need $6 million to fight an ITC case, or if you need $10 or $20 million to try and invalidate Samsung's patent, Samsung's going to win. Samsung's going to win. Again, because you have to think about this. Samsung is creating this case against the independent repair industry when their actual target is Apple and BOE. They want Apple to use Samsung screens at Samsung markups in their products. They do not want Apple to go to another supplier, and they're trying to fire a warning shot at Apple. Their budget here is to fire a warning shot at Apple. They have enough money to steamroll all of us. And don't get me wrong, I hope that Shay raises his $1 million as much as I hope that BlackBerry stops meowing in the middle of my video. But the chances of either of those things happening are, if we're being honest here, Now, Samsung has to make the argument that this is not going to harm the market. They have to make the argument that if you exclude everybody else from being able to import these AMOLED and OLED displays, that the current demand for screens will be able to be met by Samsung. However, there's a very disingenuous argument that Samsung is going to be able to make in order to claim that they will be able to meet that demand. As I said, you can buy aftermarket screens for 30 to 40 bucks from other vendors. However, Samsung will sell you that screen for $206. As I said in the beginning of this video, if you have a $200 smartphone and you can buy a $30 or $40 replacement screen, there's probably going to be a lot of demand for that because a lot of people break their screens and a lot of people are willing to pay $40 to fix their $200 phone. But what there's not going to be a lot of demand for is a $206 screen to a $200 phone, and that's what you're going to have once Samsung becomes a monopoly. Once Samsung is the only one that's allowed to import screens into the United States, they set the price because there's no competition. And when there's no competition, they can say, well, a screen for this phone is $300. And then the customer says, but the phone's only 200 bucks. And they can say, well, the screen for that phone's $300. Oh, you don't like it? You can buy a new one because they make the phone and they make the parts. Once Samsung is a de facto monopoly as ruled by the United States government, they get to set the price of the screen. When they set the price of the screen and it goes from $40 to $206, there's going to be a lot less demand. Basic economics here. You can read this in Thomas Sowell's book, Basic Economics. When you quadruple the price of something, there's less demand for it. So once the demand craters as a result of them being the only vendor, they'll be able to say, look, we can meet the demand now that nobody wants to buy it anymore. And that's most likely the argument that they will make, and that is an argument that's actually an argument that can be accepted by the ITC, because I have spoken with several people who have spoken with their legal counsel on the arguments that are going to be made and how they're usually made. Once you remove all the demand for this product by skyrocketing the price of it, once you're the only vendor, there's less demand. Therefore, the market's not harmed. Now, you may think I'm being pessimistic here, but did I not tell you exactly, line by line, play by play, how the government of New York State was going to destroy the right to repair bill? And was I not 100% right? That's exactly what's going to happen here. They'll say, no, we are 100% capable of meeting the demand. And then once they become a monopoly, they will, by setting the price to something that's ridiculous, destroy the demand. And you may say, well, they're not going to set the price that high. Well, there's no exclusionary order right now, and they're still charging $206 for a battery and calling it repair. What do you think's going to happen here? So it could be argued that it is in the public interest for these screens to be available because Samsung can't meet the demand. However, Samsung is going to be able to use a very sneaky counter-argument here to claim that they will be able to meet demand because the demand is going to be for that screen at their insane price. At their price, there is going to be no demand for it, the same way that if I change my motherboard repair pricing from $200 to $400 per board to $2,000 or $4,000 per board, that there would be virtually no demand for my services. So there's a very, very low likelihood, in my opinion, that they are going to win this case. And at this point, I think we're honestly just kind of hoping for a miracle. I'll be real. We're hoping for a miracle. He's raised $8,200 of a $1 million goal. He's trying to get $1 million, when in all reality, it's going to cost, as I said in the previous video, at least $6 million to fight this type of case. For me, one of the things that I am trying to do in my own personal life is avoid Samsung as much as humanly possible. I do not buy Samsung SSDs anymore. I do not buy Samsung televisions or monitors anymore. I do not buy products that I think used chips or devices from Samsung in their own products. If I'm buying a phone, I buy one that is used or refurbished rather than purchasing something new, and I try to avoid buying from the manufacturer. Again, I don't mean anything bad against the mobile-centrics people, the injured gadgets people, or anybody else. I don't see them beating Samsung in an ITC case unless some benevolent billionaire comes along and says, here's $10 million. And even then, we're only getting to a point where it's a fair fight rather than a guaranteed fight. I think that the only way this is actually going to get somewhere is if there is some sort of public backlash that is large enough that it actually makes Samsung think, wow, this is really bad for our brand image. Maybe we shouldn't try to have a general exclusionary order to the point where we're the only company allowed to have an AMOLED screen imported into the United States. Maybe we shouldn't fuck with the independent repair industry and people's ability to actually service their own products just to try and be anti-competitive towards another company. As I said, while I really do like the people that are involved in this industry and I like them as suppliers, I just don't see them collecting the $5 to $6 million that's necessary to win. I completely understand them opening a fundraiser. $8,200 of $1 million. $1 million is probably 1/6 of what's actually needed for a fair fight. And I'm not saying that they shouldn't try to do the fundraiser. I'm not saying they shouldn't do the fundraiser. I completely understand, scrapping and clawing in order to keep your business above water, especially when it's a business that is respected in the industry, that employs really good people that I've met at trade shows and everything else. But I don't know if that's the way to win it. I think the way to win this is to make Samsung a dirty word. And honestly, I don't think that's a difficult thing to do at this point. They used to make fun of Apple for removing the headphone jack and micro SD card slot. Now they remove the headphone jack and micro SD card slot. They used to make fun of other manufacturers for not allowing you to install an operating system of your choice. Now they lock the bootloader on all the devices so you can install an operating system of your choice. They run astroturfing campaigns on Reddit where they go out of their way to delete over 90% of the questions in their own Ask Me Anything threads, and they actually get caught astroturfing on Reddit with these fake bot accounts. I mean, at this point, in my opinion, Samsung is a meme. I don't think it would really be that difficult to make Samsung a dirty word to the point where people are like, you know what? I don't want to buy from those people. They're trying to ruin the independent repair industry. They lie and cheat on websites that are the public forum in the town square. I don't want anything to do with them. And that's what I've been doing in my own personal life. I don't buy Samsung screens. I don't buy Samsung devices. I'll rather buy a Micron SSD than a Samsung SSD. If I want to buy a phone, don't buy from Samsung. And when I'm buying a phone that may be using a Samsung screen or a screen that uses a Samsung patent, I buy it used so that they don't get any money from me. I'm going out of my way to try and avoid Samsung being a part of my life. That's a particularly difficult thing, especially with that washing machine that every now and then I want to bash with a baseball bat. But in all seriousness, I think that's the way forward here. You know, the independent repair industry is not going to fundraise $6 to $20 million overnight in order to try to invalidate Samsung's patent or take this case to the ITC. The only hope that we have is that they decide to back down, because this is so bad for their global brand, that it is so damaging to their global brand that it is not worth whatever money they may lose from Apple choosing to use another supplier. Now, I understand that some people may say, well, you know, this is necessary to fight back against China. China steals this, that, and the other. But there is employees from LG and Samsung, and it's been mentioned in these articles that I will link down below that some of these employees have been leaving to go work at BOE in China and other AMOLED companies in China. Is this really the way that we want to go about fighting it? Do we want to hobble our ability to fix things at home just to get back at one Chinese company for making a part that uses a similar pixel shape and pattern to a product made by a South Korean company? Is that really the direction that we're going? Do we really want to shoot ourselves in the foot this much when it comes to our personal freedoms to choose the aftermarket parts that we put in our own devices just to give the middle finger to one or two Chinese companies? I think that is too much of a bitter pill to swallow. But let me know what you think in the comments down below. Personally, the fact that they are not interested in there being any sort of patent royalties or anything like that, or licensing agreement, tells me that this is about going after Apple and just about trying to protect their own ability to be the only supplier of this part. Again, if they had went to Mobile Centrics and Gadgets and everybody else and said, give us 50% of your sales, or you need to pay us, I don't know, like this much a year in licensing or patent revenue, royalty revenue or something like that, we could at least say that there was some good faith negotiating going on. That's not what's going on here at all. They want to be the only one that's allowed to sell this product in the entire United States. And I think that's effed up. I think that's an abuse of patent law. And I think that this is a shame because they're going to win. Like, let's be real. Let's just be real. Again, I'm sorry, Shay, Saad, everybody else. But, like, I mean, if they can go toe-to-toe with Apple for over a decade, they're probably financially and legally capable of steamrolling all of us. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. That's it for today. And as always, I hope you learned something. I'll see you all in the next video. My best wishes and best luck to the defendants in this case. Bye now.